What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Wednesday edition of Back Your Play with Q. As always, I'm your host, Rich Quinones. Hashtag BYP. Check out and subscribe to the YouTube channel. You guys have been amazing. Just hit right around 1,500 subs, so we appreciate that. As always, NFL season, we've been talking about it right around the corner. Our NFL Insider, kind enough to join us as he does in his weekly spot, Lloyd Vance. And of course, we are brought to you by our good friends over at Played Against Sports, 1450 Clements Bridge Road in Deptford, New Jersey. All right. This is the big one now. We go NFC East, right? I mean, this is what the folks, they've been clamoring. People have been hitting you up on social, me up on social.
Yes.
When are you guys going to break down the NFC East? We will break down the NFC East. But first and foremost, how are you?
Doing good. We're here in this NFC East corridor, and we got all the fans, and that's all they ever want to talk about. You and I used to do our shows over in Jersey and Delaware, and these are their teams, so they want to
Yep.
check them out. But I'm getting excited. You're hoping that injuries won't cause too much around the league. We did see a couple of injuries, but for the most part, teams are pretty healthy with most of their stars.
Yeah, that's exactly right. For the most part, and we'll do a weekend review later on in the week. So you got the Philadelphia Eagles sitting there, obviously the defending NFC champions, losing to Kansas City, and what turned out to be a really good Super Bowl. Jalen Hurts, like other quarterbacks, got the bag. He had a wonderful performance. Right now, their win total is sitting at 11.5, plus 110, under minus 130. I think it would be easy to say that they're going to take a step back, right? Because you're talking about a team that can win 12, 13, maybe even 14 games. I mean, we saw them have that great stretch and start last season. I thought everything fell into place for the Philadelphia Eagles, if that makes sense, right? Even some of the games we thought maybe they were going to have some difficulty or look like they were going to lose, whether it was Detroit or the Colts. I mean, these are games that they came back. They ultimately won these games, but everything kind of fell into place. The NFC East was not as competitive as I believe it will be this year, but that's not to take away from what they did in the draft, right? Pulling the kids from Georgia, acquiring a couple running backs, getting Hurts in that offense one more time. I guess first and foremost, do you believe they are the clear-cut favorite to win the NFC East? Do you see any team posing a threat to the Eagles right now on paper?
Well, I always lead with as we haven't had a repeat champion in that division in quite a long time. So it's been since 03, 04, and it was the Eagles back then. So, it always seems to be a changing guard, but I think this year may be the situation where the Eagles can repeat. When I look at all the teams in this division, just in terms of talent, they just have so much. And as you talked about the draft and the building blocks that they have. And then offensively, it's always about the quarterback. So you look at all the quarterbacks in that division, and Jalen Hurts is head and shoulders above these other guys. He took that step that a lot of people want him to take last year. And the only thing I really think in terms of him is he ran more than any other quarterback around the National Football League in terms of design runs and scrambles. So you probably want to cut down on that. And they bring in Penny. They have one of the best offensive line in the league. Yes, the line's getting a little older with Kelsey and Lane Johnson in that mid-30s stage of their career, but they're loaded, and this team is going to be tough to stop offensively. Now, defensively, we can hit that in a second, but defensively, there are a couple question marks.
They started the season off 9-0, and remember, as I mentioned, tough game to open up against Detroit. They won by 3. Arizona had the Murray, when he just inexplicably could have picked up a couple more yards. Who knows if they kick a game-tying field goal or ultimately go in. But even early on, Hurts 333, 340, 239. And then Washington gives them that first loss when they were able to just run all over. Hurts didn't have a very good game. And then they went on another winning streak, and then they closed it out with meaningless games. Dallas, New Orleans, they had pretty much everything wrapped up, and then beat the Giants. And then obviously we know the march that they made. Yeah, I think offensively, they're going to be able to put up points. Now, I'm wondering too, though, you do lose your offensive coordinator and you lose your defensive coordinator. Now, I think the offense will be okay. I think they have a lot of trust in Jalen Hurts. But do they have enough trust in Jalen Hurts, or has he shown enough where he will get the keys to the car? Meaning, listen, you run it as you seem fit. Meaning, if I want to check, if I want to call some audibles, I have the green light to do that. Do you believe Hurts is at this stage of his career based on what we saw last year?
right? I always take notes in terms of ins and outs, in terms of who's joining team, who's left. And you started with two big pieces there. You know, you have Shane Steichen, our offense coordinator. He goes to the Colts. And then you have Jonathan Gannon, defensive coordinator, going to Arizona Cardinals, both head coaches. And we've seen teams in the past where this has happened to, where they're kind of taking a step back. But you know, Brian Johnson, who's the offense coordinator, is coming in. He's known Jalen Hurts ever since he was a young man. You know, kind of recruited him out of high school, and has a relationship with Hurts and his father, and they have a very good relationship. So when you talk about, are they going to open up the playbook, I think they truly are. You know, I have my guys that are at practice, and then they're telling me that they're doing a variety of different things in terms of opening that playbook up, Q. And you know, they have AJ Brown and they have Smith, two of the best you know, that's one of the best combos in league in terms of the wide receiver position. Both those guys well over 1,000 yards, and you know, they were Pro Bowl type players. So they're going to get them the ball, and then you have Dallas Goedert as well. And then in terms of running back positions, very interesting. You know, I've been hearing rumblings out there, and people have been asking me over and over again, are they in play for Jonathan Taylor? And you know, he possibly could be in play for them. It's a situation where Howie Roseman, you know him, he's going to stockpile talent, and kind of figure out, okay, we'll work around who's going to get the ball later on. But we'll see. But right now they have Penny coming over from the Seattle
And
Seahawks. You know,
Swift.
DeAndre Swift as well, with the big trade coming home from Detroit, a St. Joe's prep kid. He's going to get his opportunities well. And then they have Gainwell and Boston Scott. So they have a lot of pieces in the backfield as well. They do have to keep some of those running backs healthy, but I think they've kind of kept most of them, and most of the offensive pieces, in bubble wrap this preseason.
Yeah, their offense is stacked. Hurts, Swift, Brown, Smith. You know, even if you throw, Quez, Goddard. I mean, the offensive line. Then you look at the defense, that 4-3 base, that base 4-3 defense. To me, what jumps is the depth. I mean, we can talk, the linebacker spot, okay. It's been their bugaboo. It's been their Achilles heel. We know about the corners. We know about the safeties. We know about the secondary. But when you can rotate in, Graham or Carter and Cox and Sweat and then Barnett and Williams and David, I mean, you're talking fresh legs, man. And in the fourth quarter, you got guys that maybe are not playing every single down. You bring them in third down pass specialist. That's where I think the difference will be with the Philadelphia Eagles. And it could, when you think about it, it's night or day compared to these other teams in the NFC East. The Giants got better on defense to try to get to the quarterback. Washington, they need their defensive players to, quote, stay healthy. Dallas is still Dallas. We know what Parsons can do in some of their edge rushers, but you look at the Philadelphia Eagles, that to me is the X factor. I think the offense is going to be fine. It might take a couple, the defense is always ahead, right? Even though that's kind of been an aberration over the last couple of seasons, offenses have been scoring points. But I think the offense is going to be fine. If the defense starts to click early on, man, and they start to go into this run, and look, they've owned the teams in their division. We know that. I just think if it's a healthy defense and they get the type of numbers they put up last year when they led the league in sacks, it was incredible. Man, they're going to be, I didn't even mention, by the way, Smith or Reddick. They're going to be, again, a top 5 defense statistically. And they're going to be a game-wrecking defense. And I think that's going to be your X factor to decide how far this team can go. The offense, I think, will be fine. But again, they did lose 2 coordinators respectively. But I'm high on this defense this year.
Now, and you talked about one of the key areas in terms of that defense. You got Sean Desai, who's a defensive coordinator. He comes over from the Bears, former Vic Fangio disciple. So he's going to bring pressure. And this team, as you're talking about, they're like the old Indianapolis Colts teams. They want to get that nice big lead, and then they have all these pass rushers pin their ears back, and they're coming after them. So, when I used to cover Jim Johnson, the late Eagles former defensive coordinator, he used to always talk about he wanted all these fastballs coming off the bench, and that's what they're going to have in terms of all these pass rushers that you mentioned earlier. And they went fresh legs. So they led the NFL last year with 70 sacks, which is just incredible. And you talk about Hassan Reddick. He's a guy who just does not get his due. He had 16 sacks last year. made the huge key play in the NFC Championship game that we always talk about, knocking out Brock Purdy. That game was over after that, and there's just so many weapons in terms of the pressure that they can get. And then also now they have their nose tackles in place, obviously with Davis, and then they'll have Fletcher Cox is near the end, so they'll kind of rotate him in. But you did talk about the linebacker position. Last game that I attended, and we were talking about it, I think Zach Cunningham
Yeah.
is going to make a difference in the middle. He's a guy that's going to be able to get people in the right places. He knows where to be, and then he's going to help Nakobe Dean out in terms of his growth as a middle linebacker. And then, yes, the safety position, obviously, it's kind of a question mark. You want to see, Edmonds is coming over from the Steelers, and I do like that young guy that they drafted out on like Brown. So they do have some pieces back there as well. But, this is a very dangerous team.
Yeah, listen, 11.5. I think people are going to hammer that over. I mean, you look at their first couple games, they could go on another run, 5-6-0. They got the Jets early October, Minnesota, that second game, but then New England, Tampa, Washington, the Rams. I mean, these are winnable games. I do believe they're going to be the team to beat once again with San Francisco coming out of the NFC. All right, the team that always seems to win the Super Bowl in July and August, the Dallas Cowboys. Their win total sits at 10, overs -145. Listen, I think this is, I feel like we say this every year. Yes, it's a make or break year for the head coach and the quarterback because they're joined at the hip, and you got to call it the way you see it, right? McCarthy is just not a good head coach, especially when it comes to creativity and time management. And then you look at Dak Prescott, and the other shoe is starting to drop now and fall with Dak Prescott. Injured, banged up, inconsistent, a lot of picks. We see what's happening when players are calling him out at training camp. His own teammates, that's never a very good look. But I believe if you talk about quarterbacks that are really under the microscope going into the season, there's a handful that will talk prior to the season before it kicks off. But if we're highlighting and illustrating the NFC East, I think Dak Prescott, this is a make or break year for Dak Prescott. They not only have to make a run, they need to make a deep run, or you might see wholesale changes here.
Yeah, and you have Jerry Jones, who we all know is getting up in age, and he wants that Super Bowl. And he gave Mike McCarthy the keys to the kingdom, and he had that Super Bowl pedigree. We all know is because he had Aaron Rodgers that
Yep.
carried him to his one Super Bowl victory. And they had a nice season last year, 12-5. They did finally win a playoff game. But you're right, something's amiss with Dak Prescott, a guy who they gave a ton of money to, and their unquestioned leader, but he leads NFL in interceptions, and he's extremely inconsistent, particularly on the road. He's just not, he's a totally different quarterback from home to away game. So, you're right, Chew. It's a make or break season for him. Mike McCarthy's got to get it done as well. And Jerry Jones, he's always tinkering with this team because he wants to win that last Super Bowl. But, I just, when I look at this roster, they have some holes. We talk about the offensive line was always a cornerstone of this team. Zach Martin, who is back after a holdout. These guys are extremely old. Teron Smith, they're great left tackle. He cannot stay healthy. They did make a move in terms of Ezekiel Elliott. They stepped away from a mistake that they made in terms of making him the highest back paid in the league, and they kind of jettisoned him and tried to recoup some money. They do have the receivers now. Brandon Cooks is there. You have Gallup, and then you have CD Lamb. So they do have some weapons at the receiver position. But, in terms of having to close the gap against Philadelphia Eagles, I would say not at this point.
Yeah, I mean, Prescott tears up the knee right in 2020, misses 11 games, comes back, nice bounce back season, but then second season off of that surgery, only played in 12 last year, 2,800 yards, 23 touchdowns, 15 picks. But you sit there on the surface and say, not horrible, but it was, just the type of throws, the type of picks across the body, like not Prescott-like. I mean, if you're going to be considered a top tier quarterback in the NFL, you can't make some of these picks, some of these bad throws. The decision making is what I'm trying to say that he made last year. And I don't like the makeup of this team. I just don't. they've got weapons, yes. But you look at their defense. I mean, how much can you expect Micah Parsons to have close to 15 sacks again? I mean, they're going to key on him. They're going to double. They're going to chip. They're going to be able to contain him. Other than Parsons last year, I would say to anyone, name someone that got to quarterback last year. You'd have to pull it up and this guy Armstrong, who you've never even heard of, not you per se, but just the football novice fan, right? I mean, they need to get to the quarterback. If they can't get to the quarterback, I think they're going to be in trouble. And here's another thing. I do not, for the life of me, I've never been a McCarthy fan, never trusted McCarthy. They open up the season against the Giants, the Jets, Arizona, New England, San Francisco. Then they have the Chargers. It's conceivable. Worst case scenario, they start the season 2-4 in a bye. Now, you mean to tell me we're not going to sit here at the bye week 7, talking about, are they going to pull the trigger and fire Mike McCarthy?
Yeah, it's something that could very well happen. And when you talk about Dallas, I harken back to one of my favorites, Clubber Lang, paper champion. Like on paper, they look great,
Yeah.
and when they have a lead on Thanksgiving and everybody's, it's on national TV and everybody's yucking it up and we're going to the Super Bowl, all their fans, they always say it every year. And I look at the team, yes, they scored 27 and a half points per game, fourth in the league, but they also allowed 342, around 20 points per game. And they just seem to a lot of times lose big leads and make bad mistakes, as we're saying at the wrong time. And they also got blown out in key situations too. So this team has work to do. And yes, they have the names for fantasy football and all that, but the pressure is on. And I'm with you. When you look at some of the guys like Diggs and some of the bigger names, they're just too inconsistent. And when it's tight, they always seem to find a way to lose.
Yeah, that's perfectly said. I mean, I would hammer the under. I don't think they win 10. I can see a 9-8 win team again. Wednesday edition of BYP with Rich Quinones here. Lloyd Vance, kind enough to join us as he always does every week, from our good friends over at Play It Again Sports. All right, the Giants had a nice little run last year on their day ball, set the tone of the season, going for 2 on the road against the Titans. Daniel Jones broke the bank. He got paid. Ultimately, Saquon Barkley back in camp, coming off a career year, aside from his rookie campaign, which was just historic. They get Robinson back. They bring in Shepard. They get him back off the injury. They bring in Waller, big-time tight end. Looks like a beast. I mean, that offense played well. That first series the other night against Carolina was only that one drop by Waller. You've got Saquon. You've got some depth. You've got another tight end in Bellinger. They got the kid Hyatt. They got Slayton. They got Campbell. Look, their win total right now is 7.5. The over is plus 100. So they exceed expectations, even though I hate that phrase, but they exceeded expectations. They won 9 games. They won on the road. They won a playoff game, and then they got humbled by the Eagles on the road after beating Minnesota. I always look at teams that take that quick jump, right? And they start to ascend. And then maybe the next year they come back a little bit. And I'm going to tell you why. McDermott remember that season with Buffalo before they drafted Allen? They surprised everyone. Then they drafted Allen and they took a step back a little bit until they became one of the juggernauts in the AFC. So where are you at with the Giants right now? Do you think they'll hit the under or the over when it comes to 7.5? Do you like them winning 8, 9, 10 games, or can you see them hovering right around 6, 7 wins this year?
Yeah, I think maybe they come in at 8. It's going to be right around that number. And they had a nice season, as you said, last year. Daniel Jones finally took that step ahead that we always were wondering, could he do? And they win the playoff game and had the feel-good story. And you're right, even though they get bounced for playoffs, everybody said, okay, we're building towards something here. But in terms of the offense, you still would like to see a little bit more at the receiver position. And they was finished 15th in the NFL in terms of points scored, but only 21 and a half.
Yeah.
And then defensively, they allowed 21.8, so 17th in the league. So, Wink Martindale, their defensive coordinator, he's got some work to do in terms of that unit and making sure they're not allowing big plays and keeping team in every single game. So it's going to be interesting to see, can Jones live up to that big quarterback money. And you know, I like the Giants, but I think in terms of the division, they're obviously chasing the Eagles, and I'd put them maybe even with Dallas, maybe a little bit behind them. So um, good team, got some good pieces in place, but I think they need to clean some things up, particularly the offensive line and the receiver position. We just don't know who that breakout player is. And now Saquon, you know, he's got that chip on his shoulder. I think they're going to use him a lot, and it's going to be interesting to see how Darren Waller fits in this whole scheme as well.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons that I wasn't too nervous if they would have had Saquon or not on the field. And I say it with this caveat, they want to throw the football, period. I mean, it reminds me when Gilbride was letting Eli throw it, and he was throwing for over 4,000, 4,500, 4,900 yards a season. You know, the Giants last year, they won a lot of ugly, tight, low scoring games, 8-4-1 in one score games. I mean, that kind of tells you everything you need to know about. They're not going to blow anyone out, and they're not going to get blown out, right? I mean, they're going to hang in there. Aside from a couple moments here and there when he got humbled, and obviously the Eagles waxed them. Man, I'll tell you, Daniel Jones, for the money that they're investing in him, you know, looking at the season he had, I believe their wide receivers are going to be threats this year. I think you'll see you got some speed. I think you have some players that can make plays. I think Waller's going to open up. That's why you don't need Saquon 300 something odd touches, 285, you don't need that. But Daniel Jones, if you wrote that check, Lloyd, and then I came back and said, all right, this is what he's going to give you in a league where everyone throws for 3,500 yards and 25 plus touchdowns, Daniel Jones has to, in my estimation, for this team to make the playoffs, when you look statistically on the offensive side, right around 3,800 yards, which, let's be honest, that's 2 and some change a game. That's not asking a lot, okay? I would say 28 to 30 touchdowns, another 500 to 600 yards on the ground, and say another 4 to 5 rushing touchdowns. Now you're talking anywhere from 32 to 35 total touchdowns and 4,500 total yards. And he's got to keep the interceptions probably right around single digits. If it hits 10, 11, I'm okay with that. But that's where I think you'd say, okay, worth the investment, right? Especially with the weapons that they've given him. And again, now in that second year under Brian Dable. So it's like, all right, let me see where you can go. Throw the ball down the field, sling it. You make a mistake, make a big one. Okay, we'll live with it. But don't be consistent in these types of mistakes. And the fact that he added on muscle, he added on 10 pounds. He's very athletic. I think you're starting to see that. I just, you know, I feel like it's, people sit there and say, I'm hearing people say they closed the gap on the Eagles. Like, what the hell are you friggin' talking about? The New York Giants haven't beaten the Eagles consistently since friggin' the early 2000s. You know, I mean, think about it. The Philadelphia Eagles have owned the Giants. So you can't tell me they closed the gap until what? You win your lousy freaking divisional games. And good teams that make the playoffs have to win divisional games. Now, last year, I think, again, was an aberration because they were able to just squeak out some of these games. And, you know, they had the big win on the road against Washington where Thibodeau had the strip sack, okay? But, man, if you can't beat Cowboys, if you set the tone like last year, beat the friggin' Dallas Cowboys to open up the season. Beat the Philadelphia Eagles, you know, sweep the Washington football team, the Washington Commanders. I mean, win your divisional games. Then I can take you serious and I can say, okay, you closed the gap on the Philadelphia Eagles. Until they beat the Philadelphia Eagles, the Giants haven't closed jack squat. They haven't. They just haven't. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, and you know, Giants are a cyclical franchise. So, you know, they're up and they're down, and I just wonder if this is going to be a low season for them. You know, not horribly low, but you know, the race to 4-2 in the division is huge. You know,
Yeah.
you got to get that record. You got out of those 6 games, you got to win at least 4 to be the champion in that division. And too often we see the Giants and Washington as well. Yeah, they can win one game, but they'll turn around and lose a game they shouldn't. You know, so
100%.
it's a big question mark out there for these teams. Can they catch the Eagles? Can they turn a corner? Is the Eagles' window starting to close? Because they got some of their veterans that are getting a little bit older. Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, Lane Johnson, Kelsey. I mean, they've been around that team for a while. They were on a championship team, so well, we'll see how much these guys have left. I think they do this season, but it's going to be interesting.
I think the Giants will score points, but I don't know if it's going to equal wins, right? And they have to have a consistent pass rush. They can't cover the tight end for the past 25 years. It doesn't matter who they play. The tight ends kill them. I like their corners. I like the secondary guys. They've got some emerging stars. We know that. You got some ball hawks back there. I mean, look, you open up, I mean, this is not Dallas, and then Arizona and San Francisco. Seattle, always a tough spot to play in or play against Seattle. They get them at home. Miami, Buffalo. Look, man, these are tough games. The schedule makers were not kind to the New York Giants to open up the season. So a 2-4 start, all of a sudden people are going to be panicking. And here we go. Why'd you give so-and-so X amount of dollars and this and that? I still think Jones will have a productive season. I saw the MVP odds. I mean, they're astronomical. Would I sprinkle a little something on Daniel Jones just for shits and giggles? I would probably do it. But look, I just think they're an 8-win team.
Yeah.
I look at, I mean, then the Jets, the Raiders, Dallas, Washington, they've got spots, man. They got to get on these little runs. And the one thing I caution Giant fans, they can get giddy about all the offensive weapons. It always comes back to the offensive line. I'm not going to sit there and say, excuse. I need to see these guys and Neal and Thomas. Thomas looks like a stud. Neal's getting better. They're mixing and matching the center and the guards. Okay. But they're going to be tested early on in the season. So I'm leaning towards over winning a game they have no business winning to get to 8 wins. That's me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that 7.5, obviously Vegas always kind of seems that 7.5 is a barometer, but I do think they can get to 8, possibly 9 wins, and it's going to be John Schmitz, their high center that they drafted in the second round this year. He's a guy that they're going to try to build around him, and then you talked about Thomas and Neal on offensive line. So if they can get that offensive line going, then that'll be the key for Saquon, who you probably expect to have a chip on his shoulder. Darren Waller, who wants to prove that he still has stuff left in the tank after that trade. And then Daniel Jones, who we talked about, who is one of the best dual threat quarterbacks in the league. A lot of people don't talk about it, but he rushed for over 700 yards last year. And a big thing he cut down on Q was his fumbles. Remember, he always kind of seemed to fumble football in bad spots. He did not last year, and he showed that he was this leader of the team. And Daboll, we know from his work with Allen and several other younger quarterbacks, he knows how to get the most out of quarterbacks.
Yeah, it's a great point. Listen, he averages 225 a game. There's 3,800 yards right there, 3,825 to be exact. And I think Waller's going to, if he's healthy, he can be a dangerous weapon for them in a matchup nightmare for opposing defenses. All right, lastly, you got Washington sitting there at 6.5. I really do not know what to make of Washington because I look at a team and I see a team that's either going to shock the world, surprise, and win 7, 8, 9 games. And this kid Howe, who looked really good the other night, by the way, granted, only preseason, but he looked really comfortable in the offense. They're going to surpass all these expectations. Or I'm looking at a team that, this kid struggles early. They get hit with some of the injury bugs. I mean, look, they're plus 1,200 to win the division. I mean, I'm not touching that. But would I play them to win over 6.5? I don't know because I feel as though I don't know enough about this team, right? I know they're healthy. I mean, I know they have good defensive players when they're healthy. I think this kid Howe can play a little bit. I know they have good offensive weapons, but that dynamic of Rivera and Bieniemy would scare the bejeebuses out of me if I'm a Washington faithful, because we went through their schedule, I believe, a week or two ago. if they jump out of the gate 1-5, 1-6, 2-4, 2-5, listen, you're going to start to get players start to bark in the locker room. And when they start to side here and then they start to side here, then all of a sudden you got a clash between the coordinator and the head coach. And to me, I believe Bieniemy is just eyeing up Rivera's job. And now the question would be, to start, does Rivera get a pass this year because of new ownership?
Wow, that's a great question. And it depends how patient the new ownership group's going to be. Now, Joshua Harris, we know he's been in professional sports for a while. So he has the Sixers and the New Jersey Devils. So, I don't think he's going to be patient. I think he's going to. Rivera was a guy that he had always worked with Snyder. He helped clean up some of Snyder's mess. And you're right. If it goes wrong, I think Rivera exit stage left, and then you put the enemy in there, who's kind of like you said, he's the coach in waiting, and he's acting like it. So when you look at this roster, last year in terms of scoring points, they were not very good. They only averaged about 18.9 points per game, 24th in the NFL. Now, defense has always been their calling card in Washington. They've put a ton of draft picks on that side of the ball. They finished 7th in the league in terms of scoring, only allowing 20 points per game. So defensively, I think they're going to be all right. And then offense, you talked about the key thing. Can Howell take the reins and be the man, because they're going to need him to kind of step up, make some plays. He's got guys around him. Terry McLaurin, he's a little banged up, but he's a very good receiver, dynamic guy. They have a tight end, Logan Thomas, and then in terms of running back position, you like Brian Robinson. So
Like that
they
kid.
have some pieces there. They have a lot of pieces there. Offensive line, we'll see if Andrew Wiley coming over from Kansas City to take one over the tackle spots. And then you have Charles Leno there as well. So they have veteran tackles there. But we were talking about earlier, in this division, you got to get to those 4 wins. Can they get to 4-2 out of 6? I just don't kind of see that happen. I see in division, 3-3, unfortunately, maybe 2-4. They're another team. Do they really even have a home field advantage? Because teams are coming in there. I know I talked to a lot of Eagles fans, and they just almost count the whole stadium pretty much full of Eagles fans when they're going to those games in Maryland.
Yeah,
So it's going to be an interesting proposition for them.
yeah, it's a good point. I mean, so they were in it too, for that playoff push until they played the Giants late. They split time between Carson Wentz, Tyler Henneke. Wentz is looking for a backup job. Henneke's now back up over in Atlanta. How's a kid that had success in UNC, but I think he's a 5th round draft pick, 2022 NFL draft. So, I mean, listen, we know how it worked out with Brady, right? But I don't know. The Giants just said average right around 18. Washington average, I think you said 18 points, just under 19. That's not going to cut it in the NFL. You have to score at least 25 plus points in the NFL. You have, unless you have a 86 Giant, 2000 Ravens, 78 Steeler type of defense. It's not going to get it done. Man, I'll tell you, Dotson, McLaren, Robinson.
Yeah.
My concern with Washington is almost my concern with the Giants, because I've lived it year in and year out for the last 15 plus years. And when they had stability in 2007-11 with the line, is the offensive line for Washington. Like, I can see this kid running for his life, and all of a sudden having to force the issue and make plays. That would worry me a little bit. But I think the caveat to that is they'll win games because of their defense, right? So even when they lost Chase Young last season via injury, they showed some growth. So now you got Young returning to that starting lineup. He's in good shape. You got Forbes, you got the kid Martin that they drafted. They've improved vastly on their defense. But to me, it's going to be this kid Howell, right? I'm giving you the reins. Here you go. And here's the other thing too. I don't believe they're going to give this kid a short leash. I think, hey, listen, you're our guy going forward until proven
The
wrong.
enemy has high expectations. So,
Yeah.
and I think he wants a younger guy that he can grow with. They don't want Jacoby Brissett out there. Everybody knows he's just a veteran clipboard holder, bridge type quarterback. So why not see what Sam Howell can do? And then if it does fall apart, get into the Caleb Williams sweepstakes for next season. So, I think this defense, as you said, under Jack Del Rio, will keep them in a lot of games. And they're another team defensively. I mean, you look all over the place. They have playmakers in terms. If these guys are healthy, they're going to make some big gains. And last year, let's not forget, 500 team, 8-1. So they didn't have a losing record.
Nope.
This is a good team out of division, and they're going to compete against anybody in the NFC. So we've seen in the past 3 teams coming out of the division and make the playoffs. I don't know if that's going to happen this year, and Washington can jump in that type of mix. But I there are 4 in this division, but in other divisions they may be 2. So very competitive team. But as you said, some holes, and particularly on the offensive line, which has not been the same since Trent Williams left.
Yeah, listen, if they can get that offensive line for 11 weeks that they had against the Eagles when they gave the Eagles their first loss, right? I think it was Monday Night Football, though. They ran all over them. Then, yeah, they might even win the division. I say it tongue in cheek. I mean, right now, plus 1,200. Can they – listen, I think some odds makers have a closer – 12-1, 13-1 I've seen, but can they squeeze out 7 wins is what I'm asking you. Can they get, if you can hang your hat at 6.5 and grab it right now, do you believe they have the talent enough to get to 7 wins?
When I look at the roster, particularly with a guy that's basically a rookie quarterback, I don't think they get to 7 wins. I just
So
I
then,
think maybe they fall just short, Q. I think maybe they come in at 6, where they have a couple games where they surprise teams, and it's nip tuck, and it comes down to a field goal where we know Washington's had, they have not had a lot of consistency at the place kicking position. So, maybe they lose a game here and there because of their kicker, but they're going to be a competitive team, and teams should not look past them. A lot of times we've seen this, you and I are both NFC East guys where, fans are looking past a very bad opponent divisionally, and next thing they're surprising them, and they're losing a game or it's tooth and nail. So, they have too much talent defensively to look past them in Washington.
so what if this team goes 8-1, 9-8, they get to the playoffs, and this kid Hal looks like, a Kurt Warner coming out of nowhere, 3,500 yards, 25 touchdowns, 4 picks, come from behind, a couple big games. I'm asking you this to set you up for this. This is, I think, a huge season for Eric Bieniemy, because how many times has he been passed over when it comes to trying to get a head coaching gig? So now he's the OC. So again, new environment, new talent, change the culture. Here you go. This is his opportunity to really, I'm stepping out of whose shadow? Big Red Shadow, Andy Reid's shadow.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
And that's
so,
what people always ask me. They're like, Lloyd, and we know about the minority high record in the NFL. They always ask me, is it that or whatever? But in terms of, he's never been the head guy. You know what I mean? Andy Reid has always had that headset. And he's helped him call the plays, but he's not the main guy cooking the meal. So this is his opportunity, as you said. He's going to cook it. And we'll see if he's able to do it. But if not, you got Joshua Harris coming there as a new owner, and he's going to want to change a lot of things. Martin Mayhew's the veteran GM. A guy that's been around. He was with the Lions, now he's with Washington. But there's going to be some changes if this team cannot get it done. And how I think they want to give it a good look-see this season, see if possibly they found lightning in a bottle on a 5th-round pick. If not, they get into Caleb Williams, and then ironically, the other quarterbacks from North Carolina this year, the other top quarterbacks. So
listen, there's pressure on Rivera, pressure on Bieniemy, no doubt. All right, so that's a look at the NFC East on a Wednesday edition of BYP with Q. Rich Quinones here, our guy Lloyd Vance at Lloyd Vance. Give him a follow on social media and Twitter. Later on in the week, we will recap The week that was in the NFL with man, I'll tell you, get rid of this preseason. We blink and it's kickoff. I mean, just like that. It's absolutely crazy how bad and how fast time absolutely flies by. But excellent stuff with the NFC East. We'll get this on the YouTube channel as well. We'll do it later in the week. We'll recap everything. Appreciate a couple moments, pal.
All right, look forward to it. Thanks, man.